if thoughts. What if this catastrophe happens? Even when I'm talking to a few people, those are the people that will plan out their conversations. They'll wonder if they're boring. They'll wonder if there's something physically going on with them while they're having a conversation. Whereas introversion is a personality trait where you don't like large crowds just because you don't like them. Maybe you feel like small talk is boring. Maybe you feel like just exhausted or drained in large crowds, etc. Those are the two differences.
Yeah, and it's just important that, like, if you're an introvert, that's okay. But if you can't get through, like, we just have to talk in groups sometimes, or we have to be at a meeting at presentations. If you can't get through that, that's when it's important to talk to somebody about it. So myth, I've been feeling pretty sad this week. I must be depressed. So sadness is a natural human emotion, right? Again, it could be triggered by all sorts of events. It could be losing somebody, failing an exam, not getting a job, arguing with a loved one, et cetera, et cetera. So sadness is a normal human emotion. We want you to feel sad in situations where it's warranted. That's normal. We don't want you to just kind of go like a zombie through life and not care about things. But the difference is depression is a clinical diagnosis, meaning that there's something called anhedonia. Anhedonia means that you don't enjoy things that you used to enjoy. So if you love gardening, but the idea of gardening makes you just want to, like, no, not absolutely, I'd rather lay inside on my couch. I don't want to go out and garden even though it's beautiful. That's anhedonia. It's a feeling of worthlessness, like I'm not really worth it. What if the world would be better off without me? I'm not really bringing anything to the table. That's the difference, okay? So sadness, feeling down, feeling blue, might last a couple days, may even last a week, depending on the trigger. Difference is depression lasts at least 2 weeks, sometimes up to months. It doesn't necessarily have to be triggered by something. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. So a lot of patients will come in and say, I feel really down and I don't know why. There's no reason why I should feel so down. It can present with insomnia, fatigue, weight changes, thoughts of hurting yourself, difficulty concentrating, all of those things. So if you have these persistent down moods and you don't enjoy things, you don't look forward to things, that's kind of the difference between depression and just general sadness.
The other thing I want to add is depression is a brain disease. It's where your frontal lobe, a part of your frontal lobe is what studies show it's not working the way it should. So you may even not have overt sadness. You might just have a little bit of a personality change. Like you just might be a little bit more meh or like just blah or lack of motivation. And also another big feature that we see in depression is lack of concentration. Again, it is a brain disease. We need our brain to concentrate. So that's another complaint we get from the neurological side that, look, I think I'm having memory problems, I think I'm having concentration problem, but really it's just undiagnosed depression.
Okay.
My friend has so many mood swings, she must be bipolar. Everyone and their mothers is not bipolar these days, guys, okay? So bipolar is a true mood disorder, just like depression is a mood disorder. So we can all be moody. I can be moody. Carol definitely can be moody. So moody can come from lots of things. You can be stressed out and then have a low frustration tolerance, right? So pretend like your kid's acting annoying, like this is happening, that's happening, that's happening, and then you just snap and you're moody. That does not make you bipolar disorder, okay? And if throughout the day, 1 minute you're happy, 1 minute you're sad, 1 minute you're this, 1 minute you're that, that does not make it bipolar disorder whatsoever. Bipolar disorder is characterized by you have to have either hypomania or mania. Hypomania or mania is, again, this is a brain disease as well. So what happens is for 5 to 7 days, you have lack of sleep and not needing sleep. So some of us will have more energy kind of and feel off a little bit when we don't sleep. But these people, when they have these symptoms, they don't need sleep. They actually do better in those few days. Do better in the sense that they have more energy. Their thoughts are faster, their speech is faster, they'll start projects and not finish them, they'll be impulsive. You always want to ask or you always want to see if they're doing something that's not characteristic of them. So we can all engage in like retail therapy. I'll have patients that come in, I like went shopping online for like 3 hours, I think I have bipolar disorder, I think I'm manic. No, you are not manic just because of that, okay? You were probably having a crappy day, you wanted to feel better, so you went shopping. That impulsivity must be in addition to the sleep changes, the brain changes that come with it. Yeah, and the big difference is how often and how long they last, like we talked about.
Okay, my mom really likes things to be clean, so she probably has OCD. So just liking things to be clean and organized and nice and tidy does not equate to OCD, okay? OCD is characterized by two things called obsessions and compulsions. So obsessions are a really distressing, really kind of tormenting thought. It's something scary that comes in your head, and no matter what you try to distract yourself with, it's gonna keep creeping back into your head. The compulsion is the thing you do to make that thought go away. So whether it's even for a couple of minutes to a couple of seconds, that obsession's gonna come back in later, because that's the nature of OCD, but it's something that you do that always makes that thought finally go away. It doesn't have to be something that makes a lot of sense, right? So sometimes we'll say, the obsession will be, oh my gosh, my house is gonna catch on fire, so I better check the burner 5 times. I gotta make sure 5 times, that 4th time wasn't enough. I gotta check it one more time, and then I feel a little bit better that I didn't leave the burner on. Or it could present in a whole bunch of different ways, but it's essentially the obsession has to be really bothersome for you. It has to take up a large part of your day. So if you like your house to be clean and tidy, and it's really annoying when your kids throw their toys all over the place, but you can okay, I can deal with this later. I just need to leave the house and we have to go to the doctor or whatever. That's just liking things to be clean and tidy. Difference is you wouldn't be able to leave that house because you'd have an obsessive thought.
Another way to describe obsession is that it's an intrusive thought, a thought that comes in your head. A part of you knows that that thought is not true. So pretend you call your child and they don't pick up the phone. Automatically, oh my gosh, they've had a car accident, they've died, something bad has happened, blah, 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 blah. That's an intrusive thought. Yeah, once in a while we'll always have that thought, but if there's a persistent theme of thoughts, like harm or danger can be a theme of OCD. So anytime you call someone, they don't pick up right away, all of a sudden you go to the thought that something bad has happened, and then what will you do to kind of alleviate your anxiety? You'll either call them over and over and over and over and over again, okay? That's a compulsion, okay? Because if you don't do it, you're gonna feel like something's off. And then the other compulsion would be, like, some people have their families on those Google Map, or what is it called? Tracking, yeah. So it's a beautiful way to say that I want my relative to be safe, or I just care about them, but really there's some OCD in there, and so they'll constantly have to see where the heck they are. So like over and over and over again, otherwise they just can't function. And then another example is garage door. It's kind of like this. They've left the house. I think I closed the garage door, but I'm not sure, but I think I did. So a part of your brain thinks it's true, a part of your brain knows it's not true, but you got to do something to feel better. And many times that's keep driving back to the house and checking the garage door, etc. My sleep sucks. I definitely have insomnia. Okay, so this is a big issue for us. Okay, so the biggest reason people have insomnia is because their sleep hygiene sucks. So the thing is so insomnia is chronic inability to be able to sleep for a particular amount of time, right? And then feeling tired the next day, etc. The problem is all of our, with technology, with life, etc., our sleep hygiene has become very destructive to our lives, okay? So a lot of us will go to bed at around 9, 10 o'clock. We'll have our phones doing like this, blah, 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 blah. And then you'll wonder why at 10 p.m. you're not sleeping. Of course you're not gonna sleep, you're on your phone. That's exciting, that's stimulating, right? So get off your phone, okay? So for sleep hygiene, the light that comes from the phone, the light that comes from surroundings, etc., wakes your brain up, it confuses it. It makes you feel like you are during the daytime, exactly. And then another thing that affects it is if you can't fall asleep, so everybody is either somewhat of a morning person, afternoon person, or a night person. If you're one of those people who's a night person and just has more energy in the evening time, we would suggest delaying your sleep pattern a little bit. So maybe going to bed at 10:30 or 11 instead of 9 or 10, because what you're doing is when you're just laying in bed and trying to fall asleep, you're stimulating your brain more because you're thinking, when am I going to go to sleep? When am I going to go to sleep? You keep looking at the alarm. You're getting more and more anxious and annoyed, and that's just going to keep you up longer. Exercise. It's so important to help with sleep. It's so important. It's not even funny. During the day, I feel Anybody can exercise. All you have to do is lift your arms and legs. You don't need, if you can't lift your legs for whatever reason, lift your arms over and over again. You can move your body to some degree. I feel like most people can do that and get in a little bit of exercise to kind of wear your body out. If you're just sitting like a lump on a log all day long, you're not going to be able to sleep. Your body's not tired. And then you're going to think you have insomnia, but really you just haven't moved enough. No caffeine after 1 p.m., 2 p.m. sometimes. No naps during the day. If you take a nap, it must be before 11 a.m. It should never be longer than 30 minutes. A full sleep cycle is 90 minutes. If you get that full 90 minutes during the day, you will lose that 90 minutes at night. And then I think that's it. Yeah.
Pretty much it. Another big thing, there aren't many teens in here, but if you have teens in your lives, one of the things I hear all the time from my teenage patients is they have trouble sleeping, and then I'll ask some questions and I find out that a lot of the day, once they get home from school, they're kind of laying around in their bedroom. They're laying around in their bed, they're scrolling on TikTok, or they're laying in bed and doing whatever. The thing is, your bed is only for sleep, and your brain will get really confused about what it's supposed to be doing while you're laying in bed if you're doing anything other than sleeping in your bed. So that's a huge, huge one, is that bedroom and bed are for sleep only. Okay, I can't focus at my desk job, so I probably have ADHD. So focus can be dependent on a whole slew of things, right? Good sleep. Again, we're going to talk about sleep a lot today, but good sleep. Absence of anxiety or depression, or the presence of anxiety or depression. Having a job that stimulates you and it doesn't bore the crap out of you. All of this plays a role in your ability to focus. I may have a patient come in and say, like, I'm able to focus great at school, or great because I like what I'm doing, or great with conversations with my friends because they're really interesting, but my job is so boring and I think I have ADHD because I can't focus at work. I'm like, well, what are you doing at work? Well, I'm like sitting and looking at numbers. Well, do you like numbers? No. Okay, then you're not going to be able to focus very well, are you? So you have to do something that stimulates you, right? So all of that, does play a role in your ability to focus. Now, if all of those things are, well managed, if you don't feel very anxious, or you're not depressed, and you feel like pretty clear-headed, you got a good night's rest, you love what you do, you still can't focus, then you should probably talk to somebody about it. If you find yourself getting really easily distracted, if you kind of cut people off in conversation but you feel really bad about it, you don't mean to do it, if you are talking to somebody and you're like, wow, this person talks so freaking slow, can you just get on with the point? Or you're in traffic and you really don't have the patience to sit in traffic, those are all symptoms that may be dealing with a little bit of ADHD there.
One more thing I want to add is we'll have a lot of people come in and say, I have ADD, doc, I don't have ADHD. So the thing is, it's called ADHD, inattentive or combined, or inattentive or hyperactive or combined type. So it is ADHD, and then there's a subheading to that.
Yeah, they changed the diagnosis a while, and people get really confused about that.
It's probably just a regular headache. I'll keep taking Excedrin. Okay, let's talk about headaches just because it comes with the brain as well. So headaches actually are not that your brain proper is hurting. It's the coverings of the brain or the muscles around your skull area is what hurting. So there's a few different types of headaches that I'm going to kind of just cover here. Actually, 3 of them. Migraines, tension headaches, or medication overuse headaches. So migraines, a lot of people will say, I definitely don't have migraines. Even before they tell me their history, I definitely don't have migraines. And so I said, okay, can you just give me the symptoms, please? And so the symptoms for migraine can be, usually the headache is unilateral. It's on one side or the other. It's usually throbbing or pounding in nature. Some people describe it as sharp shooting, whatever. It is what it is, okay? Or pulsating, like you can feel your pulse, she's right. And then another symptom that you can have with these headaches are light sensitivity. Like if there's a lot of light or even a little bit of light that it really bothers you and you just kind of want to be left alone into a dark room. Another sign or symptom that you can have is vomiting. And another sign or symptom that you can have is sound sensitivity. You do not need to have all of those to have migraine headaches, guys. You do not need to be on the ground vomiting all day long to say that you have a migraine. The way I tell my patients and the way my understanding is that if you have a headache that's throbbing or pulsating in nature that gets worse as the day goes by without taking medication or without taking a nap, we must evaluate for migraine. these days migraines are so treatable, so treatable, so treatable. And they're a huge cause of disability, right? So if you don't have the right medication, a lot of people call in sick to work. And the thing is a lot of people don't feel sorry for people who have headaches because they can't see that they have a broken arm or something. So you need to be your own advocate for headaches and migraines. For tension headaches are not migraine headaches. Those are headaches that we have muscles all the way. This is all muscle, muscle, muscle. So when there's a tightness of those muscles, tension, when you're stressed, and you don't even have to be stressed to actually have tension headaches. When those are kind of tight, and people would describe it as a band-like pain, that's tension headaches. That usually either stays the same or goes away on its own during the day. And then the other thing is a lot of our migraine people will come in because like they don't really know that they're migraine, but they know that ibuprofen or Excedrin will get rid of the headache. So what they'll do is they'll have Excedrin or ibuprofen always in their pocket, and so they'll keep taking it every 8 hours or every 6 hours or every 4 hours, whatever. That usually takes the edge off but doesn't get rid of it because they're stuck in what we call a medication overuse headache or rebound headache. So what they're doing is they're making life more miserable for themselves unknowingly, but because they have to function and work. And that's another big cause of comorbidities that's very treatable.
And you can have multiple types of headaches.
Correct.
So it's not like, oh, well, I only have migraine, so I guess I can't have tension headaches. No, you can have multiple kinds.
Correct. Another thing for migraine is if you have a migraine, a lot of times if somebody's trying to talk to you or if you're trying to focus, it's very difficult. Your brain just feels like it's pulsating and pounding. That's just another simple sign.
Yes. And you can actually have, not to get too into it, but you can actually have headaches, migraine headaches, that don't have pain associated. So sometimes you have all the other symptoms, but without the actual headache, it's still a migraine. So, okay. My dad has been forgetting the details of our conversations last week. He must have dementia. So there is a difference between degenerative disease processes like vascular dementias, other types of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, that sort of thing, and what we call mild cognitive impairment, or MCI for short. So MCI can be caused by a whole bunch of things. It can be anxiety, stress, poor sleep, depression, different medical illnesses. It can be medication side effects. It can be ADHD. It can be all sorts of things, right? Anything that leads your brain to not be functioning at 100% capacity, you're gonna feel kind of foggy. You might have trouble remembering things. Usually with MCI, you know exactly what things you're forgetting, right? You're walking in and you're like, I keep leaving my keys everywhere I go, or I wrote down this appointment, but I keep misplacing where I wrote the appointment, or Carol, I'm really nervous because I was driving to the doctor's office the other day. I've been there 100 times and I missed my turn. Those are all examples of MCI. You have very concrete examples, and you're the one who's concerned about your memory. In dementia, there's a noticeable decline over time. Usually it's family and friends that actually notice it first. So it's the family and friends that are kind of concerned and are like, hey mom, I think it's important that you should probably talk to your doctor about this. A lot of times in dementia processes, patient might think like, oh, I've got a little bit of memory trouble, it's nothing to be concerned about, but actually it's more significant than they realize. As the disease progresses over time, they may have trouble caring for themselves. They may have trouble doing just normal activities of daily living, forgetting medications, forgetting how to dress themselves properly, definitely getting lost while driving. All of those are examples of more of a degenerative disease process. So when you come in and see us for a memory complaint or you're concerned about your memory, we do a full workup. We look at your memory. We kind of look at all the other things. We talk about sleep, anxiety, stress, all the other stuff that could be contributing, and we make sure that we have a good idea of what's going on.
Just another point about this. So we'll have a lot of people that'll come in and say, my mom has Alzheimer's, but she doesn't have dementia. So dementia is an umbrella term, like it's like a cough, okay? And then you have different types of dementias. The most common cause is vascular and Alzheimer's dementia, and then you have Parkinson's dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia. And again, just to reiterate what she said, dementia is a degenerative problem of the brain. Just like you have degenerative problem of the joints, like arthritis or whatever, the brain can also be prone to that. And the way it happens is you have abnormal proteins that get deposited in different parts of the brain, rendering those parts of the brain not able to work well. So in Alzheimer's, short-term memory gets affected first because those plaques build up in the temporal lobes, the medial temporal lobes, which is the part of the brain for short-term memory. In Parkinson's dementia, you first have motor symptoms because the abnormal proteins get deposited in the cells that create dopamine, and dopamine is important for fluidity of movement. So that's kind of the difference of the dementias. So they're all kind of dementias, it's just the types that they have depending upon the symptoms that they present with. I get 50,000 or 5,000 steps a day walking around at work. That's plenty of exercise. Or I get up from my couch to get a snack. That's my exercise. That is not exercise, guys. Exercise is so important, so important. Coming from somebody who hated exercise, it's so important for mental health. Multiple studies show that it activates the frontal lobe of the brain. It wakes it up. It helps it with anxiety. So depression, anxiety, a lot of these mental health disorders come from overactivation of the more primitive parts of the brain, where our frontal lobe cannot kind of down-regulate it. And exercise has been shown to strengthen that part of the brain. And just, you can't just get up and walk a few steps and think that that's exercise. It's not. You have to get your heart rate up as long as your cardiac status is good. And you have to get your heart rate up, engage in anything that brings your heart rate up, a little bit of sweating, etc. Should last even from 10 to 15 minutes a day is better than nothing. You don't have to do these hour-long exercise things, just even 10 to 15 minutes a day. I mean, ideally is 30 for 5 days a week, and it can improve your mental health in terms of depression, anxiety, and ADHD quite a bit. Actually, just because we were talking about the dementia on the last slide, it's so neuroprotective that the only thing that's been shown to slow down the progression of Parkinson's dementia is movement. So that means it has to be neuroprotective. Like, we can't even argue against that.
And like she said, exercise does not have, you don't have to go to a CrossFit class to count that as exercise. Our favorite kind of exercise that we always recommend is going for a walk. A real walk, not a walk around your house, a walk outside if you can, or a walk around the track, because we know it's Wisconsin and the weather's kind of crappy in the winter, but something. You want to go for a walk that's sustained for like 10, 15 minutes, just get your heart rate going, get the blood moving, and you're gonna feel better. It releases all sorts of healthy chemicals. You can read them down there. I can go back to the slide later if you want, but. Okay, myth. All psychiatric medications are addictive and unsafe to stay on for the long term. So fact is, some classes of medications are addictive, but most of them are very, very safe. And it's been proved in many, many longitudinal studies. So there are classes that you hear of commonly that are for sure addictive. They have been proven time and time again. Most common class actually is benzodiazepines. So that's your Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin, Valium, all those drugs that you've all heard of. We call them the PAM drugs because they all end in PAM or LAM, something along, like a rhyme like that. But basically, those drugs have been shown in studies that long-term use actually increases your risk of dementia and some other, neurodegenerative
if you're genetically
processes.
prone.
If you're genetically prone. But it's just they're not safe for long term because they become very habitual. Your brain becomes kind of dependent on them. So if you feel better, you feel less anxious, but then you're not going to feel, it's going to wear off, and then you're going to need that medication in order for the anxiety to go back down again. Non-addictive medications that we use are classes such as SSRIs, SNRIs, different types of mood stabilizers. So that some common ones that you may have heard of are Prozac, Zoloft, Cymbalta, Abilify. Those are different medications that are prescribed. However, we have lots of long-term data showing that it is safe. Studies have shown us that it's safer for your brain to treat anxiety and depression than it is for you to leave it untreated and not take these medications. It is more neuroprotective to let us treat the anxiety than to live with anxiety for a long, long time. So big take-home point I want you guys to always remember is never, ever, ever stop your medications abruptly without just talking to your prescriber first. Many of them, the Prozac, Zoloft, whatever, are safe, but you might feel kind of cruddy, to be honest. So you want to talk to us first before you just stop it. Benzodiazepines are actually very unsafe to just stop abruptly. So you always want to talk to a prescriber if a medication's not working for you and let us help you taper off of it safely.
So multiple studies have shown that the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain, does tend to shrink with time if you do not treat depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of the psychiatric disorders. So it's really important to treat it. And just a point on the benzodiazepines. So when used properly, they can actually be very safe and helpful. Just long term, you want to make sure to try to supplement them or replace them with the SSRIs, SNRIs, and mood stabilizers. We as a practice do not look at everybody as black and white. Everybody has differences, and sometimes those are important. And if that's what gives you a better quality of life so you can function and not lay in bed all freaking day, that's okay, because that's more important.
Okay, what other questions do you guys have for us? We are happy to answer anything. Yes?
The ones you said aren't addictive.
Yeah.
Do you develop a tolerance at some point? I mean, you need to take more, or does it?
So like the SSRIs,
How long
SNRIs.
can you be on them on the same dose?
You can be on them for a long time on the same dose. What sometimes does happen, however, is that a stressor will happen. Pretend somebody's for 20 years is doing great on the same medications, and then all of a sudden they have a death of a very close family member or something, and then they can relapse. Many times what they'll think is that my medication stopped working. I need to go on a higher dosage. But that's not necessarily true. It's just that you're going through that stressor, so we need to increase the dosage. That's not to say that sometimes you don't grow tolerance, but honestly, in our experience, we haven't really seen that at all. If you're on a proper therapeutic dosage, usually you don't keep growing tolerance. The other thing is we always try, so pretend somebody doesn't have a long-standing history of depression or anxiety. We always do try to wean off medications. Like, we don't say that, okay, pretend somebody's never had depression or anxiety in their life and then for 6 months they have it. We're not gonna keep you on it forever. We will. Our goal is to come off of it. But if we see that the risks outweigh the benefit, then we were gonna recommend staying on it for longer.
Other questions?
Ask anything.
It can be neurology, it can be psych.
Can people with dementia be on the SSI?
That's a great question. Yes, they can totally be on the SSRIs. They are not as effective. Why? Because as serotonin is produced in the brain, right? In dementia, you get abnormal proteins that get deposited in the brain. So those cells that are creating serotonin, or the cells that the serotonin is working on, are not as present, right? So then, therefore, those medications are not going to work as effectively. But yes, you can be on them.
Okay, is there anything, or I guess they would come in, but like for people with dementia that, for their anxiety or their, they get
Agitated.
and
Yeah, we see that all the time. It's very common as disease progresses, right? So we kind of figure out, like, one, is it anxiety or what's it causing, et cetera, et cetera. We have other medications. Oftentimes it's a mood stabilizer class that we'll give low doses, but just enough to kind of take the edge off, calm them down a little bit so they're not feeling quite as irritable and agitated.
You'll see a lot of what we call sundowning in degenerative problems like dementia, like around 4 or 5 p.m. when the sun is going down, they get more confused. Remember, these are people who have no idea what the heck is going on in their surroundings in kind of moderate to late stages, right? So their brain is trying to make sense of things, but think if you were in a world where everything you do, you keep forgetting, it's going to be very anxiety provoking, right? And so if it's just at any times of the day we give SSRIs, if it's more agitation or irritability, we sometimes give mood stabilizers like Carol's mentioned.
Yes.
Are anxiety or depression ever considered genetic?
There's a strong genetic link, right? So just because mom had anxiety doesn't mean you're gonna have anxiety, but it's a pretty strong precursor. A lot of times what actually happens is it's both a little bit of biology, but it's also situational too, right? So if mom was really anxious and she had to have the house clean or like the world was gonna fall apart, you might grow up thinking like, oh, I gotta keep the house clean or the world's gonna fall apart, right? Because it's kind of a learned behavior. Or if she's just like kind of on edge and nervous all the time, then you might kind of grow up a little nervous and on edge all the time. But so there's a strong link. We definitely ask always about family history, but it's not a hard and fast rule that yes, you're going to end up with anxiety.
What I've seen in our practice is that OCD is very genetic, illness, anxiety disorder is very genetic, which is kind of a branch of OCD. bipolar is extremely genetic. All the psychotic disorders are extremely genetic, and major depressive disorder is also genetic, but I haven't seen such a big correlation compared to the ones that we mentioned. ADHD is very genetic as well. If the mom is interrupted, you'll see the kids interrupted. So yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah. A lot of times we'll see somebody come in and then they'll be like, oh, I think my kid has this too.
Yes.
Like, yeah, probably.
Yes. Sometimes they'll think their doctor has it. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Other questions?
What was the second illness you named after OCD and before bipolar?
Illness, anxiety disorder?
Yeah, illness anxiety disorder, meaning that you have a fear of that you're always sick or that something's wrong with you. You were raising your hand?
Yeah, I was just questioning.
Yeah.
How many of these do you have to do an actual brain scan, like an MRI or something like that, to diagnose compared to looking at the symptoms of somebody who's telling you what's going on in there, comparing the two?
Yeah, great question. So if it comes, we see neurology and psychiatry, right? So most of the time our first initial appointment is going to be one or the other. You've got kind of one main complaint, and a lot of times it bleeds into another one and we make another appointment. But depending on it just depends a lot on the symptoms and what you're saying to us. So if we're concerned about memory or new onset of headaches or something like that, we're likely going to get a brain scan if there wasn't already one done, just to make sure nothing structurally has changed or nothing structurally is wrong. With a lot of these psychiatric illnesses, the anxiety, the depression, the mood disorders, typically imaging isn't warranted unless we see like a definite change in, memory or something else kind of associated that might lead us toward more of a biological cause.
The other thing is in depression, anxiety, and psychiatric disorders, it's at a cellular level how the neurons or the brain cells are interacting with each other. On an MRI scan, you can't see that. An MRI scan just tells us, is there a mass? Is the frontal lobe where it's supposed to be? Is the parietal lobe where it's supposed to be? It doesn't tell us functionally how the brain does. There are some tests called functional MRI scans, SPECT scans, and all those are not yet approved by insurance. There's no validity data to them whatsoever. There's a lot of practices that sell them for cash pay. It's very expensive and honestly doesn't help in diagnoses. If somebody, I'll give you an example of somebody who we would kind of get a scan for a psychiatric disorders, say that I had this patient actually recently. So her whole life, no history of depression, no history of anxiety, no family history of anything. She was like happy-go-lucky, did her thing, and then all of a sudden at 55, she started developing severe depression, anxiety, kind of like complete massive changes. So for somebody like that, that's very typical for them especially at that age, we would definitely get brain imaging just to make sure there's no tumor or mass in the brain that can mimic that, right? Because depression, anxiety, all these come from our brain. If you have a mass or something like that sitting in your brain, it can kind of mimic it. Again, it's rare, but that's just one of the times that we would do that.
Yeah.
How would you define addiction? How do I know I'm addicted to something?
Good question. So there's a difference between dependence and addiction. So dependence means that your brain is kind of depending on it, but you're not going to have like severe effects if you don't get it, right? So a good common example is with some of the anxiety disorders, like you might be a little dependent on your therapist. You might be a little dependent on your SSRI because you know it's helping you, but you're not necessarily addicted to it. If you don't get that medication, you're not going to die of withdrawal symptoms. With addiction, there is like a physiological response. So there's a part of the brain that has to do with, it's a reward center, right? So your brain starts considering whatever that substance or act, or because it could be gambling, it could be so many things. It considers whatever that substance or act is to be a pleasure. So every time you do it, every time you engage in it, now all of a sudden you're getting this rush of the pleasure chemicals. So your brain gets confused with like, oh, well, I'm only going to feel pleasure if I do X, Y, or Z. So that's where addiction kind of comes into play. Now, again, it can be some of these medications. It can be a lot of street medications, obviously. It can be alcohol. It can be gambling. It can be all sorts of different things. But usually it starts as a dependence first, and then it will turn into an addiction over time.
addiction when it comes to medications too, like Adderall and benzodiazepines. A lot of our patients will be like, I think I'm addicted to my lorazepam or my clonazepam or whatever. And we'll say like, okay, how much have you had to increase it over the last like year or so? No, my dosage has been exactly the same and I can function great with it. And I don't get a high when I'm taking it, but I need it. So that's not an addiction. Addiction is where you will go out of your way and do anything it takes to get that. That's like heroin or even Xanax or whatever, but and your need keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. That can be for anything. That's an addiction.
You truly develop a tolerance to it at that point.
Correct.
So your
and
Xanax
that
dose isn't
need,
working
that pleasure
anymore.
need.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
Thank you.
Great questions. Any more? Yeah.
Is anxiety curable?
Yeah, to an extent, yes. So it's very manageable. It can be treated. So it depends on so many factors. There's not really a good black and white answer to that, unfortunately, because every person is different. Every person's biology is different. Every person's situation is different. In most cases, we can get you to a place where it's extremely manageable. You have therapy techniques, you have your medications, you have, all these things that you learn over time that make it so you might feel a little anxious, but you're able to get on through your day and you can push past it and you feel good. Not only okay, but good.
So in my opinion, moderate to severe anxiety is not necessarily curable. But what I've learned myself over the last few years is that although we think that we have no control over our thoughts, that is a complete myth as well. So when we can kind of determine some of our thoughts, right? We can take control of our frontal lobe when our anxiety is somewhat treated, okay? And kind of reframe our thought processes. But it becomes a full-time job. Like getting control over your brain, when it comes to anxiety, it is a full-time job. It is very difficult, I'm not gonna lie. But if you use the right techniques with meditation, with exercise, with medication, and that becomes your job in your life in addition to life, it is very treatable. But you have to engage your frontal lobe and you cannot give in to the more primitive part of your brain saying, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this? You have to use your frontal lobe. You have to reframe your thought. You have to learn meditation and get more awareness of your thoughts so you can choose your thoughts better. And that is doable. I've seen it happen over and over again. It's very difficult, but it is doable. To answer your question, moderate to severe anxiety, in my opinion, is not curable unless you use all of those means. And still then, it's a work in progress.
You're still gonna be working on it.
So you were recently told that your mind plays games on you. You think you're going to faint, but go for a walk, get outside, and that the mind game will go away. Is that myth? Is it true?
It's true.
It's
so
very
what
true.
you're not giving into your amygdala. Amygdala, remember, is so amygdala is our fight or flight response. That part of the brain in people who have anxiety disorders is more active. That everybody has that part of the brain. And the reason we have it is if a tiger comes in front of us, we don't want to just look at the tiger and say, oh, you're so pretty, come eat me, right? We want to be able to run and jump the hell away from it, right? So the problem is when we have anxiety, it's like over active. And so when we use our frontal lobe, like going on a walk and then just focusing not on this thought. It's easy to focus on this thought. This is our natural. We feel like anxiety is our natural being. It's not. So if we use our frontal lobe and actually try to control that thought or try to control what our brain is focused on, then absolutely it's a great idea. Pretend you go and take a walk and look at the trees and count how many branches there are instead of like counting how many times you're worried about whatever. Of course, reframing thought processes can work in anxiety. 100%.
And that's how a lot of forms of specific therapy work. It's cognitive behavioral therapy. The whole idea is that you're reframing your thought processes. You're retraining your brain to not jump to worst case scenario. You're training it to, maybe it'll dip into worst case scenario for a half a second, but you're going to other thought places first.
Last question, I promise.
Oh my God, ask whatever.
No, these are great.
Yeah.
Food supplements, is that a myth? Or is that, can it be combined? What's your
So our take is on food supplements is that eat a very balanced diet. So it has been studied over and over again that plant-based, and I'm not vegetarian, so I can't even pretend to act like I am, okay? But plant-based diet is definitely better for you than a meat-based diet. If you're going to do meat, fish high in omega-3 like tuna and salmon is very good for your brain. Omega-3 has been shown to be both cardiac healthy and also brain healthy. It helps with anxiety, it helps with mood, and it helps with ADHD. And then lots of greens and antioxidant fruits like blueberries, blackberries, etc. So basically what we eat kind of to some degree is kind of what we are. The other thing is just on that, but it's kind of not related, but is what we intake in our brain in terms of our daily, so you know what we eat is kind of what we become, right? A little bit to some degree. If you keep eating unhealthy, you're going to gain weight, you're going to do this. Obviously weight is a difficult thing to control. There's like a lot of genetic factors, etc. But also what we bring into our mind, right? We should give our mind more respect. We should not sit there and just listen to the news all day, right? So think about the news. The news would not be the news if there was anything that much positive, right? They'll have one stupid story on every news thing that, oh, this is a positive thing, but positive things happen all the time, right? So pretend they'll say, this break-in happened on 82nd Street, whatever. What about the millions of people that night who didn't have a break-in? But then what do? We watch that and we say, the world is coming to an end. I knew it. There was a reason I was anxious. There was a break-in 82nd Street, right? So please only intake, if possible, positive things. Please, like you don't have to be religious. You don't have to be spiritual. There's like people from all walks of life trying to preach positivity, okay? And just kind of focus on that. That's how you should start your day off. Not with like whatever Fox News or whatever the CNN News or whatever else, okay? So just intake good positive thoughts to give your mind that respect.
And people always laugh at us when we say, but if we have a patient that comes in and say like, oh, I'm so anxious and I can't get my brain to turn off and XXXXX, right? We'll always say you have to find a mantra that you like. And then you have to repeat it. And you're gonna feel really, really silly at first, like repeating this silly phrase over and over and over again, but it works. Once you find one that you like, I am happy, I am safe, I am calm today, or good things are gonna happen to me today. If you start repeating those things over and over and over again, eventually your brain is gonna start believing it.
That will be your new normal. Everybody thinks it's normal these days to be anxious. No, your new normal can be that. What she's saying is when you do that mantra, you're strengthening the frontal lobe. You are putting effort. You're focusing on something to strengthen that frontal lobe. That frontal lobe also needs exercise, and that's how you exercise it. Multiple studies have shown that if you do mantras or just strengthen that frontal lobe, that anxiety and depression definitely are affected. Even another example, which you could use a mantra for, is say that somebody has a little bit of a short fuse, or somebody's angry at somebody one day, right? We are deciding to be angry, right? So somebody treats me crappy, I am deciding to be angry at them, right? I am deciding that I'm going to ruin my whole day, abuse my mind, abuse my body, and be angry at them, okay? Instead, reframe your thought. This person treated me wrong. It's okay. I'm still alive. I'm going to treat myself okay, right? I'm going to treat it. You know what? I'm going to send high energy vibrations to that person. I hope that person is okay. I'm sure they did it for a reason. Think of how your heart rate gets affected with choice A or choice B. That's what I mean by we have control over our thoughts. Use that control.
How do you improve your control?
Keep focusing at it. How do you control, you improve control over anything? It's an exercise. It's a full-time job to take care of our mind.
Yes,
The only thing I would say is you practice when you don't need it.
that's right.
You got it.
When you need it, you think, oh, I gotta breathe here, or I have to do whatever tool is that you know.
You got it.
That's right.
But most of us don't do that. We don't learn health anywhere. We just think it's supposed to happen.
Correct.
Exactly. All right. Any other questions, you guys?
Is there any go-to medication for anxiety besides PAMs, lorazepam?
Oh my God, yeah.
The SSRIs, the SNRIs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many. And when we do a new a new patient appointment, right? We talk about all of this. We talk in detail about your symptoms. Are you more of a physically anxious person, or you have heart racing and all this stuff? Or are you more like ruminating thoughts? Because there's different medications for both. So we take all of that into account, and we obviously take in your history and what's worked in the past and it hasn't worked and whatever. But yes, of course.
And how much do you use therapy or counseling?
We have therapists
Almost
and counselors in our
exclusively.
practice. Yeah, it's very
we-
important.
People just want to take
No. It's both.
We strongly believe in therapy. We have what, 8, 9 therapists now. We strongly believe in therapy.
And to me,
in our
meditation
practice.
is therapy, yoga is therapy, all of this is therapy. Anything that improves your mental
And
health.
our therapists are all in the sense that their goal is to make them not need you. They don't want you to need them forever. They want to get you to a place where you learn these techniques and you're able to go on your own and be like, okay, I can do this. Yeah,
Are you accepting new patients?
always.
Yes, we are.
Are you? Oh,
Of course we are.
Always. I brought, I'm going to hand it out. I brought some goodies for you guys. I'll put our brochures and our cards on the back table so you have all of our contact information. We have some cute little bags and cups if anyone's interested. And then, yeah, we're always accepting new patients.
you have all your information on,
I do, yeah. I will give it to you.
then I won't copy it down.
We brought all that. Any other questions?
Are there any good books you recommend to read on this?
So can I tell you somebody that I really like? And again, I'm not religious. She's a little bit religious, but not really. I think anybody could learn from her. Her name is B.K. Shivani, Shivani. She's phenomenal, man. Like in terms of like how she allows you to learn how to control your mind and thoughts. I feel like she's phenomenal. I honestly listen to her probably like 5 times a day. And then there's, give more.
My favorite book that I always recommend is a book called The Body Keeps the Score. So that one is excellent. It tells you about how all of this stuff is very primitive and how sometimes you'll wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, why is my heart racing? I was in a dead sleep. It's because you're baseline anxious and we got to focus on that. Talks about how the brain is keeping all of this in, even if you're distracting yourself and you're busy through the day and you're kind of putting your mental health on the back burner, how important it is to not do that. So that's a very, very good book too.
I know a lot of people identify with Eckhart Tolle. I have not read his stuff, to be very honest with you. I know my dad used to like him, but I have no idea. But I do hear a lot of my patients like him as well. And anything that kind of centers around mindfulness and meditation. So meditation doesn't mean you're closing your eyes and doing, that's not meditation. Meditation is actually more awareness of your thoughts so that you can control your thoughts better. So you can be in control of your life. That is true meditation.
And what was the first name again?
So B.K. Shivani. I don't know, I just think she's like amazing. Yeah, she does. Happiness Unlimited. It's called Happiness Unlimited. Yeah.
She's with us south of Bansal, Michigan.
Yes.
All right, any last minute questions? Well, thank you guys so much. You were truly a wonderful audience.
Yeah, tell us. I think there's one more question.
I've been reading on the internet about TMS therapy for depression and anxiety. Does it work? I know.
So deep TMS and superficial TMS definitely work for depression. A lot of practices will say
it's for anxiety.
Well, so I believe there's more studies for depression than anything else. What it does is TMS is transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a magnetic field. It's an oscillating magnetic field. In physics, if you have an oscillating magnetic field, it produces an electric current. We map your part of the brain that causes that we believe is implicated in depression, and we activate it with that electric current. It's a commitment, it's a time commitment, meaning that it takes 6 weeks, 5 days a week, for 20 minutes a day, and what it does is each day it just strengthens that frontal lobe more and more. In our experience, major depressive disorder is treated more effectively than anxiety. There's also an OCD helmet, so there is an OCD helmet that's also used. We just don't have that. There's some practices around here that do, I think.
Do you do ketamine at all?
I'm sorry?
Yes, ketamine.
It doesn't cure. Again, it treats the depression. A lot of people have had, maybe a few years later, they'll have relapses or stuff. It doesn't cure, but it definitely helps treat more than medications do a lot of times. In terms of ketamine, so ketamine is an anesthetic. It can be used to kind of reset the brain. That's why we think it helps in depression. The enantiomer or the S-ketamine is the type that's FDA approved and more controlled, and that's a nasal spray. It's very effective in the right person for depression or PTSD.
But a friend who was reluctant to use it on her child, even though, and this woman was in her like mid-20s or whatever, nothing else had ever worked. And I'm like, nothing to lose at this point.
Correct. It can be very effective.
It can be. All right. Well, thank you again.